You can be seated. So we'll admit there may be a time during what I'm getting ready to do where you might actually want to stand up and throw something at me, and that's okay. It's a difficult subject this morning. And I learned one thing this week. My anniversary was Saturday. And the greatest thing to study on the week of your anniversary would not be... Okay, you could. Absolutely. It's not evil, pain, and suffering. Like, stuff bleeds onto other stuff that just don't need to be together when you're trying to celebrate. So a lesson learned, I'm going to intentionally not plan this during this time, next time. But, you know, us as believers, and this one, you know, we've been talking a lot about being able to answer tough questions that people who aren't Jesus followers have for people who are. But this one's more for us. I think this one's more for everybody. So I don't want to spend too much time philosophizing, if that's even a word, on it, because when you're in the middle of pain, who wants the philosophy, right? Just show me a way out of what I'm going through. But we have to start there. And I guess, scholastically, it's known as the problem of evil. If there's a God that exists, can you explain to me why somebody drives a truck through a crowd of people? Can you explain to me why people get in airplanes and fly into buildings and kill all of these people and God doesn't stop it? The biggest one that people go to and have a problem with is Nazi Germany. Right, from 1930s all the way through 1945, where Hitler exterminated 6 million of what we know from the Old Testament to be God's people. Now, a lot of them would have been believers and would have been praying to be delivered from that situation, and we see that, and we know that many of them weren't. So, we have this problem. If God exists, how come there's all of this evil in the world? That argument in itself, though, if you think about it just from a rational basis, and again, I know that doesn't always help when you're going through something, but we need to start there. In order for you to stand up to Hitler and say what you did was evil, you have to assume that there is evil, and by assuming evil, that there's also good, and there's a line between. Correct? You follow me? So if there is something we know, does anybody in here agree with what Hitler did? Okay, I know there's probably some pressure not to raise your hand if you do, but I love you anyway. I strongly disagree, but I love you anyway. Right? Obviously, that was a wicked, evil thing to do. You don't put 6 million people in gas chambers just because they're a certain nationality. You don't do that. That's evil. Right? So we're assuming that to be evil. If we're going to do that, we've got to assume that somebody has made a line saying that that is evil, and somebody's also given us good. You know, not too many people are going, well, if there's God, how come there's all this stinking good in the world, right? How come all these good things happen to people? Now, sometimes people say, hey, how come I have good things happen to me and other people have evil things happen to them? And that's different. That's understandable. But for us to stand up and say, hey, you can't do that, that's evil, we're assuming that, right? So why doesn't God stop evil? Vince made a good point the other night about how when you get into a marriage, the thing that you love about somebody is the thing that you end up hating about them, right? Was that here or was that over there? That was over there, so now I really need to explain myself, don't I? So basically what he said is like, hey, you know, you find the thing where you match. Like say, hey, I love this person because I'm kind of messy and she cleans up after me. Well, after a while, she starts to get on to me about picking up my stuff, so that starts to make me angry. But it's the same quality that I'm in love with and also that's driving me crazy. So we got this gift that's kind of the worst gift God could have possibly ever given us. And it's also the best gift that God could have possibly ever given us. And that's our free will. Right? That's our free will. We know that God is love and that we believe that God created the creation and us to have a loving relationship with Him and with each other. The only problem is for Him to give us that potential, for love to be genuine and authentic, that there also has to be the potential to not love, or love doesn't exist. We all think love is a great thing, but unfortunately, the other side of free will is that we can use it to not listen to God and inflict evil, pain, and suffering on each other. So the question is then, where does God need to start stopping the evil? Does He need to just, stop Hitler, right? Or does He need to stop Hitler's parents from whatever went on in the house to maybe help send him that way? Does he need to stop the jealous husband from killing? Or does he need to stop it at the adultery? Or does he need to stop it at the lust? You see what I mean? Who gets to make the line of where God starts to destroy evil? The problem is, if God is going to get rid of evil for good, he's got to get rid of us first. And we've got to be willing to say, hey, you got to get rid of me. I realize I'm one of the ones that's got to go if evil's going to go. But again, people get sick, they suffer, they pray. We have a God that said, hey, anything you ask in my name, I will give you. So we start to wonder about that. You know, I was talking to somebody before the service. I have to be I'm an intentional optimist because that's not my default mode. I don't generally look for the good in every situation. I've had to let God change me, and I've had to try to intentionally try to look for the good in stuff, because when I see a situation, I automatically think about the bad stuff. I have to force myself to think about the good stuff. So let's just take the Holocaust. Why didn't God stop it? Number one, is it still going on? Number two, even before it started happening, people were running. There was an Aliyah movement that saved 14,000 Jewish people to Palestine. There was a movement for the care of children that saved 10,000 to the UK called Kinder Transport. The French secretly have housed 12,000 to 15,000. 2,178 from Poland to Japan. There were the Yishuv people, and I couldn't find out where they were from. It sounds like a Russian thing, who housed 18,879. And how many of those people that were in the concentration camps that were praying went on, but then also how many were liberated? How many were rescued? How many of them do you think were praying when the Allied forces showed up and set them free? So I know that doesn't completely help with everything, but I believe that God was there. I believe he was there. Let's look at the book of Daniel. I think this is to help me understand why things happen, and more importantly, what can I do when I'm in the middle of the storms that are going to come in my life? I like to think about this story in Daniel chapter 3. Is everybody familiar with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Okay, I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were disciples of Daniel, but they were believers in God, right? And the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know, that wasn't Christianity yet. It was back before Jesus came. So Nebuchadnezzar was the ruler at that time, and he built this great big statue, all right? And he wanted everybody to come to bow down and worship the statue, right? And when the trumpet would blow, you could just worship whatever god you wanted to. Well, these three stubborn teenage boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, said, we're not going to do that. So they had this fiery furnace where they were going to throw people who refused to bow down to those gods. Can we pull up the passage in Daniel? Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now they're bound. And cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, and in their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace was exceedingly hot, the flame of fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It was so hot, they just went to throw them in, and when they did, it burned them up. These 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound, into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Hey, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king. Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." Does that give you chills? Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." They were bound and had to be thrown in. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. And the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the kings, the counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor their garments affected. And the smell of the fire was not on them. So on a smaller scale, when we want to get in better shape, we go to, I don't know, sometimes when I try to jog, I'm wondering, why is God torturing me? Why does it have to be that? How come I have to go through this much pain to be better off in the end? Now, this is on a much bigger, much more scary scale, but the interesting thing about that, number one, God didn't keep them from going into the fire, but where was He? He was right in there with them. He was right in there with them. Their clothes didn't burn up. They didn't burn up, but what did burn? Whatever was binding them. Sometimes, unfortunately, just us knowing how we are, if we're honest, and God knowing how we are, sometimes that is the last way that He can reach us, is to get us to the point where we have nothing to depend on but Him. And sometimes when we go through stuff, we're going through stuff for that purpose. But I think this is where the rubber hits the road, really. The cross. When we look at Jesus on the cross, we see God who, not like the other ones who said, hey, you do this, and if you mess up, I'm getting rid of you. Right? You're never going to reach me. Even in Islam, there's a heaven, but you never actually get to God. He made a place, but you never get to reach with Him. You never get to commune with Him. But on the cross, we see Jesus enters into human suffering. He's letting you know that, hey, everything that you've experienced on earth as a man, I've experienced on earth as a man with you. Even to the point of, I don't believe you're there for me. When did Jesus not say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Which is to say, why have you turned your back? Even His own Son. Why did He do that? So He would know that He was in this with us. Jan and I just watched a movie. Has anybody seen the Miracles from Heaven yet? Anybody seen that? Okay, you've seen that too. There's a scene, what I think is the most powerful scene in the Bible. There's two little girls. One girl comes from a very faithful family who mom prays with them every night. Right? She gets this crazy illness, this crazy intestinal illness that she's dying from. So she's going through all of this pain and all this stuff. When she ends up in the hospital with another little girl named Haley, ironically enough. So thanks, God's really hitting me with this one. But they're there together, and Haley is watching her doctor come in, and she's got to take a test where she can't have any metal on. So he's trying to convince her, hey, I need you to take that off so we can do this test. Well, she says, I can't, because it reminds me that Jesus is with me. So this doctor, being the good guy that he is, he says, well, we'll put it up here on the IV. That way his power will go into the medicine, and he'll be able to help you from the inside out, which was clever. But this other little girl's listening. So the next time they're alone in the room, the little girl that was sick with cancer tells the little girl that's got her a Jesus background. She asks, is Jesus with me too? And she says, yeah. Well, Dad hears this, the dad of the girl from the non-religious home. And he pulls mom of the religious or of the Christian girl outside. And he's not being mean. He's not being aggressive or threatening her or telling her, hey, stay away or anything like that. Just very calmly says, hey, that's great that you believe what you believe, but we don't really believe that in my house, and I don't want to give my daughter false hope. I hope you understand. And she said, I understand more than you know. I understand more than you know. Well, it turns out, Haley, the little girl with cancer that came from the non-Jesus background, she passes away 2 weeks later, but the little girl from the movie doesn't know. But at the end, she falls from a tree. I don't know if you know this. She falls from a tree. I don't want to spoil it, but anyway, she gets healed. And she's giving her testimony in church. Sorry. I told you I was going to make you mad at me, but that's not why I thought. But anyway, her dad comes to the church. Now, he doesn't say, hey, I believe in Jesus. He doesn't do the dramatic transformation thing. Who knows what happened there? That it wasn't the point of what he said. But he comes and he says, hey, after this little girl told her she didn't have to be afraid, I didn't really agree. But here's what I know. The last 2 weeks of her life were joy-filled. There was no fear, and she believed that God was with her, and it changed her life, and it changed my life forever. So when you think about things like the Holocaust and gas chambers, and as horrible as that was, some people were there to comfort those who didn't believe. I've got to believe that. I've got to believe that. But Jesus was here with us. But is there a light at the end of the tunnel? You know, this is great, but if you're here with me, am I just going to suffer and suffer and suffer and that be the end? Let's look at 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 through 8. Peter writes, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to His abundant mercy has begotten us again a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible, undefiled, and that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise and honor and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen, you love. Though now you do not see Him, yet believing, you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory." So no matter what you go through. Now, when that was written, the Jewish people were being persecuted like you wouldn't believe. Oh, the Christians were. Most of them were Jewish, but they were Christians. Were being persecuted for what they believed. And what does he say to hold on to? Hope. That God has gone to prepare a place for you. That Jesus had rose from the dead, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. Brother Rick gave us an illustration, I don't know if you were here, where we had a rope that we stretched out all the way across through here. And God being eternal and infinite, right, and heaven being timeless, and our time on earth, how short it really is compared to all of eternity. That God has got a place in store for you, no matter what you're going through. And I know with a group of this big, that's a lot of us are going through something, and we're wondering, is God going to come through? We have hope because He was raised from the dead. We sang that song, "Because He Lives." Isn't it funny it doesn't say because He lived? All right, it's not about what He did, it's about what He's doing right now, that He's alive and He's with us. At the very end of everything, Revelation 21, verses 4 and 5. "And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and He will dwell with them, and they shall be His people. God Himself will be with them and be their God, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, no sorrow, no crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away." Everybody in here is going through something, has gone through something, and will go through something. Some people it's going to be to a much higher, much more devastating degree than others, but everybody. Not only us, but people who don't believe. Hope. This is the difference. When you go through something, you're not going to. If you were in one of these, if you survived one of those gas chambers, you wouldn't come out the same. And when I lost my grandparents, I didn't come out the same. There were people in my family who got closer to God and were spreading joy all over the place. And there were people in my family. I have one family member who hasn't worked a day and has been drunk every day since. You're going to move one way or the other. It's going to come. The choice is, do I want God to be with me in this or not? I believe by far the most wise decision is to have God with us. So if you need prayer for something this morning that you're going through, if you want the church to pray with you and ask God, hey, why is this going on? Job did it for like 40 chapters. Right? So why? Why? I mean, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And then he had his friends who were trying to help, but they were really not helping at all. And so Job asks all these questions, and when God never answers why, does he? He never tells him why. He just tells him, hey, this is who I am. And in chapter 19, verse 25, Job says, hey, I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. And that's how he made it. God is with you. He won't leave you or forsake you. The most common command in the Bible is, do not fear, I'm with you. And hopefully, as a church, family, we can say that too. That whatever it is, if you call on us, we'll come. Now, we're going to fail because we're not, you're human. But we want to do our best as a family. I need that from you. There are many times in my life where I need people to come speak truth in my life and to bring and give me comfort. And here's another thing, and this is free. This is free. Your presence, I think of when I see somebody, hey, I've got this child that's got this terminal illness, because as a pastor, I think, okay, this is going to happen. It hasn't yet, but it will. And somebody's going to start asking me these questions, and all I'm going to worry about is how do I answer? How do I answer? How do I answer? But what does God do? He gives us His presence. He listens. The greatest gift that you can give anybody is your presence. And I don't mean being in the same room, just there. You are theirs for whatever they need to say, whether it's railing against God or whatever. The greatest gift that you can bless somebody with that's going through something is just your presence. So we're going to sing Because He Lives again. I just want you to think, hey, if you're going through something, I just want you to pause and be still and know that God is God and He's with you. And just listen. If you know somebody that's going through something, take this time to be intentional right now and say, hey, God, I'm going to go at least be present in that situation. Can you do that? Can we do that this morning? I love everybody, and let's sing and worship together.